All right, I'm not even sure how I want to start this rant, so I'm just going to start it. We are like unbelievably cooked, and I really don't feel like most people comprehend like the scale to which this is going to happen. So for context, I'm an electrical engineer. I used to design data centers. I don't anymore because it's a pretty messed up industry, and I kind of hated it. But I have real world tangible experience designing these things, and from an electrical perspective I understand how much power it takes to design them. And so for context, when I started designing data centers back in 2022, which is like when I started, uh, they were building them around the scale of 16 to 32 megawatts, like in that range, which is large but relatively reasonable for a building that's dedicated just for computers and like AC systems for computers. In the time since then, they have grown exponentially. So the average size of a data center has gone from 16 to 32, like 4 years ago, to about 1 to 2 years ago, going to around 64 on average, 64 megawatts, and is slowly encroaching upon a situation where most data centers on average are 128 megawatts. And I know I'm throwing a bunch of numbers at you, so like doesn't necessarily make a lot of sense to you on a baseline, but understand that like the small scale, like what I was talking about with the 1632 megawatts, like that's more power than a small town will use, right? So when we're talking about building a data center on the scale of over 100 megawatts, that's a small city. That's like multiple small towns together, all of the electricity that they're using, all being used by a single building, right? So I was at a conference earlier this year for electrical engineers where we were talking about the generator industry. And we were learning about the expected power demands over the next 8 to 10 years, right? We're already seeing this in the electrical industry where there are long times to like get any kind of equipment that might be used in a data center because they have more money than any other kind of construction project. So they get priority. They can outbid everyone else. They can get the first in line to get all the devices. So everyone else, like I'm no longer working in data centers, and now everyone else is dealing with long wait times to get their equipment. The flip side of this is realizing like, oh, these data centers are expecting to use a lot more power. That's why they're buying up all of the electrical equipment. So based on the projections from one of the world's largest generator manufacturers, we find out that the expected demand from like electrical demand for the United States in the next 8 to 10 years is expected to fully double. And for context, like we have taken over 100 years to get to the current amount of electrical demand we have on our grid. And in the next 8 to 10 years, we are expected to double the amount of power that we're consuming as a nation. As of right now, the plan is to power all of that new demand through fossil fuels, right? So what's been happening over the last couple of years is all these data centers are popping up, and it started with just regular traditional data centers, but now we're seeing AI data centers. And as someone who I worked on University of Kentucky in their Knoxville location, they were upgrading a regular data center into an AI data center. That upgrade alone took what was previously a 1 megawatt building and turned it into a 3 megawatt supply needed to actually power the building because of both the cooling capacity needed and the actual power for the computers going way up due to the fact that they were AI systems rather than regular data centers. The long and short of it is that an AI data center is going to take 2 to 3 times as much power as a traditional data center, and a traditional data center takes a ton of power at a baseline. So as all of these AI companies are growing, building out their capacity, they're building these giant data centers. These data centers are taking 2 to 3 times as much power as a traditional data center. Meanwhile, all of these tech companies are still building out regular data centers to run their day-to-day operations like AWS or Microsoft or Meta, all companies that we were building data centers for in my last company. These companies don't care about anything other than their bottom line. And I need to make that like incredibly clear to you. Like my best example of this is what's referred to as an arc flash. In electrical engineering, if you don't design a system right, or even if you do design a system right, and someone's doing maintenance on a live piece of electrical equipment, and they touch two pieces of metal together that aren't supposed to touch, what can happen is a giant voltage differential that essentially just creates a thunderbolt. Like you just create a lightning strike indoors. And what will happen is I watched a safety training video for this, right? On someone who's working in a data center, just twisting some kind of bolt on an electrical panel, and the wrench that he's using accidentally touches a piece of metal it wasn't supposed to touch. And in the next frame, the only thing that's left is smoke and his boots because his entire body was instantly vaporized. And this is a problem that only happens when you're working on live equipment, right? So theoretically, you could turn off the equipment to do the maintenance. You could turn it off and eliminate this concern entirely, like prevent this kind of accident from ever happening. The problem is that these data centers are so valuable to these large tech companies that turning off the data center for even a couple of minutes, let alone like an hour, is going to cost millions of dollars. And paying out a settlement to the family of the person who died trying to do maintenance on the data center while working on live equipment is going to be way less than $1 million. So it's a lot cheaper for them to keep the systems live and just pay out settlements whenever someone dies on site. So these are the kind of companies that we're operating with, and like the baseline kind of ethics that these companies have, right? So I'm at the Generator Conference, and these companies are now reaching a point where they're building new data centers in areas where there's not enough power for the data centers based on the like current electrical grid. And there's no plan for these local power companies to actually build out the power that's going to be needed. So now tech companies are moving from like located, like some of the data centers we built would be in like Nevada, right? Places that were relatively near a large nuclear facility that was capable of supplying more power for the data centers that are popping up in the area, or near like in the desert, near solar farms. All of that real estate has slowly been purchased up over the last couple of years. So now they're kind of just putting them wherever. And the areas that they're putting them into like don't have the capacity to power these new data centers. And like their plan in its entirety is that they're going to create their own power on site, which if they were doing it through renewables, like that would be fine. But that's not what's happening here. Like that's not the case here. What's happening is they are now buying up pretty much all of the generator supplies. So like they're buying up all of the natural gas generators, all of the diesel generators. The generator manufacturers are building even larger generators to deal with this demand for the giant data centers that are coming out. Like Generac, for example, just developed a, I think, 2 megawatt generator, which is way larger than any other generator on the market was, specifically to be used in data centers. And it can only be powered by diesel. Most of the generators can also be powered by natural gas, but both of these are fossil fuels. So like keep that in mind. All of these giant new data centers that are popping up at a baseline are going to have generators to deal with what's called like N+1 redundancy, so that there's no downtime because of the issue that I mentioned earlier, where if there's any amount of downtime, they're losing millions of dollars. So to baseline, they're already purchasing a ton of generators. But what's different these days is that instead of purchasing these generators to be emergency backup systems, the new plan is that these generators are actually going to be the primary power source for these data centers, which is why the manufacturers need to build way more data centers to deal with this new demand. The problem, as I stated at the beginning of this, is that we are going to double the amount of power that's being consumed by the United States. And we're currently on track to power all of that through fossil fuels. So like the TLDR of all of that is in the next 8 to 10 years, we are on track to double the amount of fossil fuels that we're burning. And that's kind of what I mean by like, we are unbelievably cooked, because there's no way that we can burn twice as much in terms of fossil fuels as we currently are without doubling the effects of climate change and how much our planet is burning. And I was talking to a friend of mine who's also an electrical engineer who like doesn't work in this industry. And they were saying like, oh, well, I think the environmental concerns are kind of overblown. Like how much power are these centers actually using? And I want to give you like a frame of reference. So like Elon Musk, for example, building out a 500 megawatt data center out in, I think, Tennessee. And I think it's going to be near Nashville. And the center that he's building, again, 500 megawatts, half a gigawatt, is going to take more power than the entire metropolitan area of Nashville that like currently uses. So all of the power that's going to be used on that data center is most likely going to come from either diesel or natural gas. And what drove me crazy at the conference that I went to is that they used to have a hydrogen-based generator. They stopped selling it because it wasn't profitable. There wasn't enough demand to sell those devices, so they stopped making them. And this comes back to like our choices, right? We make choices as a society as to what we're going to build, how we're going to build it. We have decided like we're going to build out natural gas pipelines. We're going to send natural gas all over the place, make it really cheap, really easy to distribute. We're not going to do that for hydrogen, even though hydrogen is clean burning, doesn't create any CO2, can be used in fuel cells relatively safely. No, we're not going to do that. So because there's no equivalent to the natural gas pipeline for hydrogen, there's no demand. Like there's demand for natural gas generators because people typically have access to like natural gas pipelines in a lot of areas. That doesn't exist for hydrogen, and therefore we're going to go with what's cheapest and what's easiest based on the examples I told you earlier. Like we're just gonna burn stuff because like it's way cheaper to buy a diesel generator or a natural gas generator and power it through your local gas supplier than it is to build out solar panels and the necessary energy storage capacity that you would need for it. And I know that we're all concerned about like AI taking over and like thinking for humanity and whatever you're concerned about in terms of AI. But I really think we need to refocus the conversation onto the environmental impacts and the scale at which this is happening. Because this is not like, oh, we have too many cars on the road that are burning gas, like we need to get people to take public transit, which I agree with, but it's not that scale. This is saying like all of the fossil fuels we're currently burning, we're going to double that in 8 to 10 years. And if we don't do something about that, we're going to watch these storms get worse. We're going to watch these natural, like the wildfires get worse. We're going to watch entire ecosystems collapse. We're going to watch ocean acidification get far worse because that's what happens when you have too much carbon dioxide in the atmosphere. The ocean increases its acidity and entire ecosystems start dying out in the oceans. And when the ecosystems in the ocean start dying out, that starts spreading to other ecosystems. And like, we're going to see more droughts. We're going to see more climate refugees. We're already seeing all of these things happen. Like we just watched hundreds of people in Texas die from a flood that was supposed to be a once in 100 year flood. And I have spent my entire lifetime watching storms get progressively worse every year as the phrase once in 100 year storm gets used on an almost monthly basis to the point where we're no longer surprised. We're no longer even fazed when these storms happen. They've just become a part of normal life, as if this has always happened this way and storms have always been this horrendous and this devastating to the populace. And we just elected an administration that's not just like not going to work on renewables, but is actively hostile towards existing renewable projects. So like I don't even really have a solution for this problem. I needed to speak about it because I don't hear enough people talking about what's about to happen. And I don't hear enough people explaining the scale of what's about to happen. And as of right now, all I can do is sit by and watch it happen. And it's driving me insane. And it's driving me insane to have this knowledge and to not be able to do anything about it other than tell people. So that's what I'm doing. I'm trying to tell people because if we don't know about it, there's nothing, we can't do anything about it. And at a minimum, at least making people aware of the scale of what's about to happen will help us start to come up with a plan of how to combat it. But in the short term, we're going to see energy prices go up. When a data center gets built in the area, that's where the supply goes first, and then it goes to everyone else because they're the biggest payers to the utility. So when the data center opens up in your neighborhood or in your state, and it's on the same local grid as you, you're going to see your prices go up. And when eventually the grid runs out of supply, you're going to see your house taken off the grid before the data center does. The economic impacts and the climate impacts of what's about to happen with all of these data centers is at a scale so large that I genuinely, like, I, as an electrical engineer, struggle to wrap my head around, like, the sheer magnitude of what's happening. I can only imagine how other people feel about it because, like, I struggle to describe it, and I struggle to, like, really break it down. And even, like, to the extent that I'm able to do so, I don't know what to do about it. And I guess I'm crowdsourcing at this point as to, like, how do we deal with the situation? Because I'm scared. I'm honestly just scared. Like, I have watched the oceans get warmer, and to allow for algae to grow in places that it couldn't previously grow, slowly killing the local fish and populate, like, the local environment. I have watched entire places become dry because of droughts. I've watched places become flooded over because of it, like intermediate rainfall, not consistent rainfall or whatever. I've watched Los Angeles burn to the ground because of wildfires. that have been getting progressively worse during my entire lifetime. And I've watched an entire political party and like media apparatus be constructed specifically to prevent any progress on this issue and to prevent anyone from really like doing anything about this or doing anything about energy generally. And I don't even know where I'm going with this. I'm done. I like, we're cooked, and we're so cooked. And I don't even think most people realize the extent. Like, we all know that climate change is happening, or most of us at least. We know that it's a problem. We know that like we need to do more renewables. And like, I became an electrical engineer because I wanted to address those problems. And the reality is that the barriers to fixing those problems are not scientific, and they're barely even like, they're economic and political, and they're mainly political, to be honest, because like things like the natural gas pipeline infrastructure, right? Like, we are spending public funds to subsidize the infrastructure necessary for fossil fuels. We're not now, because we did at one point try and invest in renewables, but we're no longer going to, and we're going to cancel the projects that already exist. We've already taken all of the money out of the National Renewable Energy Research Lab out in Colorado. We've defunded the entire department in charge of loans for the Department of Energy that was previously providing loans to new startup energy companies to allow them to get off the ground and actually develop new forms of renewable energy. And like the issue in terms of climate change, like it's economic, and it's policy wise. Like, it's not profitable to store energy. That doesn't mean we shouldn't do it. But the lack of energy storage capacity is the reason why renewable businesses struggle to get off the ground, because you can make as much solar and wind energy as you want, but if there's nowhere to store it, then you're going to sell it back to the utility for pennies in the dollar, and you're not going to make a profit. And it's the storage capacity that we need to build out. That's what I've learned as an electrical engineer, is like, we need storage capacity. We need it spread out. We need it everywhere. And we need to incentivize municipalities to create their own energy storage, to incentivize the residents in each municipality to build their own solar panels and to be able to sell it back to the town for a higher price than what the utility is willing to pay for those kilowatts. But those things aren't going to happen because it's considered to be like a socialist position to have any kind of public owned utility. And the fact that the arguments against climate change have been as successful as they are, they continue to be as successful as they are, make me feel like I'm speaking into a void, because there's even the people who do understand it are giving up. Like, I know so many electrical engineers who have just accepted everything that's going on and have just decided like, well, it is what it is. I don't accept that. And I don't think you should either.